On October the 20th this year, Warrant Officer Vincent of the Canadian Army was killed, and his family got the message that he'd been killed in Saint-Jean. 2 days later, the Corporal Carrillo was killed in Ottawa, and his family got the news. The death of these two men affected people in every part of this country, of 33 million people. And it blocked out, for the next week, blocked out virtually all other news, and governments around the world sent their condolences. I don't mean to minimize the deaths of these men or the conditions under which, or situations under which they were killed. But what I do want to do is draw a contrast to this country 100 years ago in 1914. And in 1914 we had 7 million people. Now that's the size of, or a fraction of the size of Tokyo, Mexico City, and New York City. It's about this, just a little more than we have in the greater Toronto area right now as far as people go. These numbers from the Great War are overwhelming. And a country of 7 million people, we had almost 60,000 of those death notices, rather than 2. So these numbers are beyond me, and they overwhelm me. It's difficult to get a grip on that. So I thought maybe that we could maybe relate to the loss of one soldier. And he happens to be a local boy. He was a local boy. His name was Armadas, and he went by Frederick Armadas. And I hope that the Varrins present will excuse me if I change back and forth between the old pronunciation of your name and the new one. And Frederick Armadas Varrin was the son of Joseph and Catherine of Griffith. And he was killed on Easter Sunday, 1916. And he was killed at Ypres, or Ypres is in the Flemish language, and he was killed by a sniper. Now, so I'd like to just go through some of the correspondence. It can be rather cold, but this is what one family had to go through over months, hearing about the death of a son. And at this point I'd like to welcome the Varrin family, Kevin and George, Edna, McDonald, and Merv, of course. Everybody knows Merv. So we're just going to start out with the photo of Armadas. He's a pretty handsome young fellow as a civilian. Merv and Kevin both tell me that that's a characteristic. Handsomeness is a characteristic of the Varrin family. He would be about, probably about 21 years old then, just enough to grow a mustache. This is Armadas with his platoon. Now he joined in Winnipeg, and he joined the 79th Cameron Highlanders. And this is Armadas here. I think I'm correct. Okay. On the end here. He doesn't look that happy, and with those great coats it looks pretty cold, and that's Winnipeg. And this is the battalion. Now, anyone not familiar with military terminology, a battalion is a self-sufficient unit, but it's smaller than a regiment. They are able to operate on their own because they have a headquarters, they have their own cooks, and they have artillery support, etc. But though he belonged to the regiment, when he went overseas, he would have gone with a battalion. And it's quite confusing because all the Canadian soldiers were in battalions, and they didn't mean a lot unless you had the numbers to go by. Regiments is what we normally think of. He went overseas probably about February of 1916. And this is the death notice that his parents got. These death notices were not that subtle and not that sensitive. I'll read it. Sir, with reference to the casualty to the deceased soldier marginally noted. Pretty cold. I have the honor to state excuse me, that the following information has been received from the officer commanding 43rd Overseas Battalion through the officer in charge of CF Records, CEF, London, England. The marginally noted man was shot in the head by sniper fire and killed about 8:15 p.m. on the 23rd of April. And again, this is a sign of the times. His mother is not mentioned at all. Only his father is addressed. It's addressed to Joseph Varrin, Dacre, Ontario. And he said, I have the honor to be, sir, your obedient servant. Again, it's sir. This is a follow-up letter, and this is from his CO, the stilted language of the time, and I suppose the callousness. I am in receipt of your letter of the 3rd, in reference to your son Frederick Armados Varrin, who fell gallantly fighting with his comrades in the front of the line trenches on the 23rd of April, and he died about 8:15 while being carried to the dressing station. So it's rather matter of fact. The last paragraph, while I sympathize with you, I also cannot refrain from admiring and even glorifying in the thought that a man has on his tombstone this fine reading, killed in action. I don't think that would make anybody feel any better. Parents, what was on your tombstone? Finally, there was another letter, and this came from somebody it's a little more personally. And this letter is addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Varrin, which is a step forward. The first paragraph reads, you are suffering a great sorrow caused by the loss of your son at the front. While doing his duty in the front line, I write you a few lines concerning the sad occurrence. And he describes how he was shot and he died on his way to the dressing station. And this is from this is a captain, and he's in charge of the company that he was with. This is a map of the front, they call the Ypres salient. And this is the city, it's a city now of Ypres, or Ypres as we call it as well. And these are the areas where the front lines were. Here's where Armados was killed, and this would have been well up on the ridge overlooking the whole salient. The Canadians took that ridge after a lot of Brits were killed there, and he would have been in that first group of Canadians. There is a very large cemetery, and we think this map would be over 100 years old. So the cemetery would be in this area somewhere. And it's called Tyncott Cemetery, and it is for all the soldiers of the British Commonwealth. They're buried there, the ones that they could find. Now, if they could find your body, you would be buried there with a tombstone. There are tombstones, but the unknown is written on them. This area went back and forth several times. So 2 months after Armados was killed, that was heavily shelled and probably churned up, and he was buried, they said, according to the letter, very close to the line which would be here. And so his grave, those were temporary graves, and they just put a bottle in the ground and a cross, wooden cross. So a lot of the guys that were buried there, it was turned up so badly that they had no graves. They were lost. And there were of the Canadians, there were about 20,000. So in this cemetery that we'll show you in a few minutes, Tyncott, they have the names on a wall, the fellows that have no graves. This is really it's a memorial, but they call it the Menin Gate, and it's on the road out of Ypres. All the fellows who went to the front went down this road, and the road goes right through the center of this, and of course through the other side. And all the names of the people, the fellows that were killed in that area, in the Ypres salient, as they call it, Flanders Fields. They have the names and their rank and when they were killed and their outfit that they belonged to. Now, it's very large and domed, and they're roofed off to the side, and they're all filled with the names engraved in marble. And the Canadians, they put them out here on this side. And again, it's all by battalions. So when we were there, we couldn't find anybody we knew. When Carol and I were out front here, there was some young girls came up to us, and apparently it was a school project, and they had their little pencils and notebooks, and so we asked them if they spoke English, and they couldn't speak English. We asked them if they spoke French, and they couldn't speak French. They spoke only Flemish. But anyway, we understood, and they wanted to know if we had any relatives there, and we had to say no, but we didn't know of any. The fire brigade has a memorial ceremony 365 days a year inside this, every evening at sunset. This is the interior looking, the road is here. This is one of the rooms off to the side, and these are the names of the people. So that's on the road up to the front, and Armados would have gone up that road. This is looking back towards the city of Ypres, and as you can see, it's quite different now. This would have been just a mud hole at one time, but now they crops and they rebuilt the city. As a matter of fact, they made the Germans rebuild it. This is the cemetery I was speaking of that was close to the front, and you can look from the cemetery up to what they call the Maple Copse, C-O-P-S-E, meaning a little wooded area. This wall is curved, and the names of the fellows that have no graves are on the inside of that curved wall. And this is the other side of that wall. So if what we think is that Armados does not have a grave, his name would be on this wall, somewhere on that wall. If they did bring his remains back before this whole ridge changed hands, then he would be buried in one of these 12,000 graves that are here. This is his last pay sheet, and you can see the Army wasn't a very well paying career. He has here $63.89 as the balance, what he had on him and what was coming to his parents. And this is his last will and testament. It said, and they did this before they went overseas, so he did this in February 19th. In the event of my death, I give the whole of my property and effects to Mrs. Joseph Varrin. He didn't forget his mother. The Army might have, but he didn't. At Dacre, Ontario, Canada. Frederick Armados Varrin, private. His number, February 19th. 43rd Battalion, Canadian Expeditionary Force. And anyone who has passed the cemetery at Holy Rosary, and if you face the fence, this is to the right next to the road front. And this is how Armados is remembered. And you notice that he doesn't have Frederick on there. He went by Armados. And this is, thank goodness, after 100 years. This is in memory of one of the 60,000